Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're actually taking a bit of a trip back in time, but it's got some really relevant implications for right now.
Hmm.
We're diving into a document called The Catholic School on the Threshold of the Third Millennium. It was published back in 1997.
Right. By the Congregation for Catholic Education, they were looking ahead to year 2000, the Jubilee.
So kind of taking stock.
Exactly. Think of it like a snapshot.
Yeah.
A deep reflection on where Catholic education was then and the challenges, the opportunities they saw coming.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive.
Well, it's really to pull out those core insights. What were the key characteristics they focused on? What hurdles were they facing? And maybe most importantly, what does all that tell us about education more broadly, even now?
Right, decades later. Okay, well, starting off, the document really doesn't pull any punches.
No, it doesn't.
It jumps right in, identifying what it calls a significant crisis of values, especially in highly developed societies.
They point to things like subjectivism, moral relativism, even nihilism.
Yeah. And they mention the media often amplifying these trends. Looking back from now, how accurate does that feel?
That's a really big question.
Mm.
I mean, that feeling wasn't unique to them, right? There was a broader sense of societal change, a questioning of established norms.
Sure.
And if you look at today, well, debates about truth, the sheer volume of different viewpoints online, the difficulty navigating information, it definitely feels like those anxieties about values haven't exactly vanished,
If anything, they've maybe intensified.
perhaps. And the media's role,
Hmm.
completely transformed, obviously, by the internet, social media, creates new ways to connect, sure, but also huge challenges around, credibility and how different ideas spread.
Yeah, it definitely feels like those early worries have just gotten more complex.
Yeah.
And this crisis of values was just sort of the starting point of the shifting landscape they saw.
Right.
They also talk about this extreme pluralism, making it harder to keep a strong sense of shared community identity.
Yes, exactly. They saw that increased diversity, while it can be really enriching, can also lead to fragmentation. It makes it harder to find that common ground, those shared values within a community.
Which raises a big question for schools today, doesn't it? How do you handle that? Fostering belonging and dealing with such diverse backgrounds?
It's a constant balancing act for educational institutions.
And then there's the speed of change, technological, economic globalization. They pointed out it was widening the gap between rich and poor.
A trend that sadly seems very familiar. That impact of globalization on economic inequality was a huge concern then, and it's still a critical global issue.
And schools are right in the middle of that, trying to equip people.
Absolutely, giving them skills, knowledge for a changing economy, but also, ideally, fostering social responsibility, solidarity.
On top of all that, they bring up increased migration, leading to societies that are more multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious.
And they saw that as both, potential enrichment, but also a real challenge for schools.
A dual perspective.
Yeah, acknowledging the richness diversity brings, but also the complexities. Integrating different cultures, beliefs, perspectives within school, it requires really thoughtful approaches. Curriculum, intercultural understanding, dialogue.
And in countries with, a long Christian history, they noted this growing sense of the faith losing its central role.
Yeah, becoming less of a default reference point for understanding life, maybe more marginalized.
That's a specific challenge for Catholic schools, isn't it? Maintaining their identity when the cultural backdrop is shifting.
Definitely. It makes you think, how can faith-based institutions effectively communicate their values now? How do they contribute to the conversation when their core beliefs might not be widely shared or even understood?
And then just to add another layer, the whole function of education itself was apparently expanding.
Right. Not just kids and teacher training anymore.
But across different life stages, different settings, demanding new content, new skills, new models beyond the traditional classroom.
It really highlights how dynamic education has to be. It can't be static. It's got to evolve with the needs of people in society. They sort of foresaw that need for lifelong learning, for schools to be more adaptable.
Okay, so that's the context, this backdrop of pretty significant change. But then the document gets into the specific joys and difficulties Catholic schools were facing. Let's start with the positives, the joys. They really emphasize their role in evangelization.
Yes, especially where other kinds of pastoral work might be limited. It underscores that core part of their identity being an instrument of the Church's mission. Faith formation and education are deeply linked there.
They also highlight contributions to social and cultural development serving the less fortunate.
And even innovation in teaching methods. Plus, the commitment of the teachers, both religious and lay people.
That commitment point comes up a lot.
It does. It paints a picture of these schools as more than just academic centers. They're active in the community, agents for social justice, places of pedagogical development, all driven by dedicated educators.
And the point about supporting families, especially those going through tough times, that really stands out.
It does. It shows the school as a vital support network,
Mm-hmm.
going beyond just lessons.
A kind of pastoral care dimension.
Exactly, that holistic approach, thinking about the social emotional well-being of students and their families, that's key to what they're describing.
Okay, but then there are the difficulties, and they're quite frank about them.
Yes.
They mention students sometimes lacking effort, self-sacrifice, perseverance, and a lack of positive role models, maybe even at home.
That sounds like a tough thing for educators to deal with. It points to those broader societal challenges, doesn't it? The pressures on young people.
So the schools have to step in more?
Well, the document suggests that, yeah, that schools need to focus more on character development, cultivating virtues alongside the academics because of these external influences.
And then this other issue, growing numbers of students who either lack religious or moral formation, or they're just, well, not interested.
Apathetic, maybe.
Yeah, with the main goal being just getting qualifications for a job.
hmm And this leads to what they call pedagogical tiredness.
Right, making it hard for teachers to balance being an instructor and also, like, a moral guide or mentor.
That tension is central, especially for faith-based schools.
Mm.
You have the societal pressure pushing towards purely instrumental outcomes, get the certificate, get the job. And that puts a real strain on educators who see their mission as much broader.
They also mention external problems, poverty, hunger, conflict, urban decay, making it hard to even run educational projects.
Yeah, and sometimes governmental obstacles too, even in places that were becoming more democratic.
Reminds us that schools don't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all. They're tied into all these social, political, economic realities. The document rightly flags those systemic barriers that can block access to good education or hinder a school's mission.
And finally, money struggles, especially where governments don't really support non-state schools financially.
Right, which raises that really serious concern. Could Catholic schools become only for those who can afford them?
Which kind of goes against their whole mission of serving everyone, especially the less fortunate. Has that funding situation changed much since '97?
Oh, it varies hugely.
Mhm.
Different countries, different regions, the debates about fair funding, government support for diverse school options, they're definitely still ongoing in many places.
So that worry about access based on money, still relevant.
Very much so, unfortunately, in many educational systems today.
Okay, so after laying out this whole complex picture, the document shifts to what it calls fundamental characteristics to be strengthened.
Yes, kind of a positive roadmap forward.
And the first one is integral education of the human person. Let's unpack that. What does integral education really mean here?
Well, at its core, it's about educating the whole person,
Mm.
not just the intellect, but also their physical, moral, and spiritual sides.
Okay.
It's rooted in what's called Christian anthropology, the understanding that humans are made in God's image, have inherent dignity, a spiritual dimension.
Yeah.
And the document argues that the fullest understanding of what it means to be human is found in Christ. So education should aim to develop people in all these ways, letting all human values kind of find their unity in him.
So much more than just job training or academics, it's about shaping well-rounded people with a sense of purpose.
Exactly. And they warn against reducing education to just, technical skills. You need those deeper values, that bigger vision of life.
They also caution against this idea of neutrality in education.
Yeah, they suggest that trying to be completely neutral might actually obscure essential values or even a basic understanding of what it means to be human and what life is about.
Because education always transmits some kind of view, even implicitly.
That's the argument, that it inevitably conveys some understanding of human nature and the good life. So attempting neutrality can sideline those crucial discussions about ultimate purpose and values.
And they ground this theologically, quoting Vatican II. It is only in the mystery of the Word made flesh that the mystery of man truly becomes clear.
That's a powerful anchor for them. It underlines the belief that you only fully grasp human potential and destiny through Christ. So from their perspective, a truly integral education has to be informed by that faith lens.
Okay, second characteristic, ecclesial identity. This sounds like the core of what makes a Catholic school Catholic.
Precisely. The document insists this isn't just an add-on, it's the foundation. It's what gives the school its unique character and makes it a genuine instrument of the church's pastoral work.
So it participates in the church's mission, evangelization.
Yes, and it's seen as a privileged place for Christian education, a place for evangelization, complete formation, enculturation, dialogue between different people.
So it's not just having a religion class. This identity should, what, permeate everything.
That's the ideal. The whole ethos, the curriculum, the relationships, the community feel, they describe it as a place of ecclesial experience, part of the wider Christian community's life.
And they really push for schools to be seen as integral to the church's overall work, not separate.
Definitely. There's a call to strengthen those ties between schools and the local parishes, the diocese, to make sure everyone sees the importance of education in these schools.
And they single out the role of religious institutes, nuns, brothers, priests.
Their presence is highlighted as a powerful witness, an example of selfless service, a vivid image of the church. They argue against any kind of groundless separation between schooling and broader pastoral activity.
So education itself is seen as a form of pastoral work.
Fundamentally, yes. It's about spiritual formation, holistic development, not just academics in isolation. And consecrated individuals are seen as embodying that commitment.
Okay, third characteristic, cultural identity, defined as the synthesis of culture and faith. How does that work practically in a school?
Well, it's about making sure knowledge isn't just learned facts, but it's understood within a framework of Christian belief. The idea is that knowledge seen through faith becomes wisdom. It helps build a cohesive worldview.
So integrating faith and reason across subjects.
Exactly. Trying to show how they complement each other, leading towards a unified Christian understanding of reality. It's not just about adding a prayer before math class.
It's deeper than that. They say subjects convey values and truths, not just information.
Right, and the atmosphere matters. An atmosphere of seeking truth, guided by competent, convinced educators who are seen as reflections of Christ, the teacher.
So teachers are crucial here too.
Absolutely.
Right.
Their competence, their conviction, how they live out this synthesis, it's all vital for fostering mature personalities in the students.
Moving on to the fourth, education as a work of love, with a real focus on being a school for all, especially the weakest.
Yes, this connects directly back to the historical roots of many Catholic schools serving the poor and marginalized.
But they broaden the idea of poverty.
They do. It's not just material lack. It's also what they call new forms of poverty, like a loss of meaning, lack of ideals, broken families, spiritual emptiness, being enslaved to societal idols, risk of unemployment.
So the schools need to respond to all of that.
With that same spirit of Christ's love for the poor. Offering education, yes, but also job training, human and Christian formation. It's about addressing these deeper needs.
A renewed commitment to outreach.
Exactly. Underscoring that education rooted in love and compassion can be transformative, offering hope and opportunity to those who might otherwise be left behind.
Fifth characteristic, service to society, placing the school firmly within the wider community.
Emphasizing that schools aren't isolated bubbles. They're connected to politics, economy, culture, and Catholic schools should aim to be positive models for other institutions.
Oh, so?
By offering that comprehensive value-based approach, refusing, as they put it, merely partial approaches to educate.
And they talk about a clear public role, not just for Catholics.
Right. It's an expression of the church, yes, but with a public character, serving the common good. Open to anyone who appreciates their educational project or philosophy. That's especially important, they note, in places where Christians are a minority or developing countries.
So they contribute to pluralism and families' rights.
Precisely. Guaranteeing cultural and educational diversity, upholding the freedom and right of families to choose the education they want for their kids.
Which naturally leads to calling for governments to ensure real equality.
Yes, and proper recognition, including financial recognition for non-state schools. It leads to the principle of subsidiarity, respecting choices made at the local, family level.
Advocating for policies that respect parental choice, basically.
And ensuring money doesn't become a barrier to accessing the education families believe is best, that fundamental right to freedom of education.
Okay, and the final characteristic they highlight is the climate of the educating community. This seems to be about the internal life of the school.
It really focuses on the importance of positive interactions, collaboration among everyone, students, parents, teachers, directors, non-teaching staff.
Building community.
Exactly. The need for real personal relationships with educators, genuine respect, consistency in attitudes. They argue this community dimension isn't just sociological, it has a theological basis too.
And again, teachers are key.
They place primary responsibility on teachers for creating that specific Christian school climate. Teaching is framed as this morally profound, creative vocation.
With a big impact on students through those relationships.
Definitely. Teachers are fulfilling a specific Christian calling, sharing in the church's mission.
And parents.
Also crucial, they have the primary responsibility for education. So schools need to really support family involvement through contact, dialogue, personalized approaches, building that homeschool partnership.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the Catholic school and the threshold of the third millennium, it really is striking how many themes from '97 still feel so current.
It's true. They clearly saw many of the challenges coming, didn't they? And they strongly reaffirmed the need for that holistic, faith-informed approach.
The emphasis on core values, identity, service, community.
It all remains incredibly relevant, especially in our, fast-changing world. The document still serves as a potent reminder of the vital work education does.
And that prophetic idea of investing in young people.
Absolutely. And it connects, as you said earlier, right back to the Second Vatican Council's mandate for these schools, their role in the Church's mission and in dialogue with the wider world.
A framework for navigating modern complexities while staying true to their core mission.
That's a good way to put it.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to take away. Think about all these challenges and characteristics laid out back in the late '90s. How have these issues actually evolved today, not just in Catholic schools, but across the entire educational landscape?
Yeah, what do these reflections from the past suggest about the future of education for everyone?
It's a question that feels more important than ever. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.